Welcome to the channel, peeps. Today I'm out on my FZR1000 EXup 1995, the last of the Yamaha EXups before it became the Thunderace and then the R1. Now, it didn't really become the R1 because the R1 was almost a new bike, well, was a new bike from the ground up. So this is the last of the Yamaha FZR1000. I apologise, I did take my mic and tried to do a blog as I was riding. Unfortunately, I was experimenting with the mic's location and I basically messed up. And yeah, you just can't hear it. You can hear the engine, but you can't actually hear me speaking. It's very, very faint. So I've recorded this at a later date and added it in. I hope it all makes sense. Please enjoy. I certainly did. Since the mid-80s, performance motorcycle manufacturers have been engaged in a battle to outclass each other. This is thanks in part to the development of race bikes, which continue to push engineers to develop machines that often feel like they belong in the circuit. One of the first game changers was the 1987 to 1994 Yamaha FZR1000, a predecessor to other legendary sports bikes such as the Honda FireBlade and the Yamaha R1. While the FireBlade and R1 are often more celebrated today, the FZR deserves much more credit. The FZR is notable. After all, it was regarded as the world's finest production sports motorcycle in the late 80s, scooping numerous awards well into the new decade. In 1989, it was even named as the best bike of the 80s by one publication. No doubt the rapid 0 to 60 time of 3.9 seconds and 160 miles per hour top speed helped propel the FZR to glory. The FZR is notable as the first production motorcycle to use a DeltaBox chassis, a new type of technology using an aluminium parameter type frame which, you guessed it, had its roots in Yamaha racing. The engine in the 87 to 89 FZR1000 was similar to that of the FZ750 released 2 years earlier, but with a larger inline 4-cylinder 4-stroke 989cc engine producing 136 brake horsepower. The FZR1000 also weighed just 209 kilograms, outclassing many of its competitors. In 1989, the FZR1000 was redesigned, featuring an upgraded 20-valve 1003cc engine, producing an even punchier 148 brake horsepower. In 1989, FZR1000, known as the EXUP, was given a major chassis redesign as well as a new look with twin round headlights. It was this version that gave the FZR1000 its world-beating reputation, recognised for class-leading handling. Following the EXUP, the FZR received constant updates to ensure it kept up with the competition. However, the release of the brilliant and hugely successful Honda FireBlade 3 years later meant Yamaha had to go back to the drawing board. The replacement, the 1996 Yamaha FZR1000R Thunderace, was a stopgap model that used the FZR1000 derived 5-valve 4-cylinder engine, which was updated for mid-range torque rather than maximum power. I was lucky enough to have the last of the EXUPs and also the Thunderace. Yamaha would not see the same level of success until the Yamaha R1 was released 2 years later. The Yamaha EXup system was the exhaust ultimate power valve. It's basically a 4-stroke version of the Yamaha power valve system that was fitted to RD 350s, etc., all the 2-strokes. And it constantly adjusts the internal diameter of the exhaust system to better suit the speed of the engine. In doing so, you get more bottom end and top end power that you wouldn't normally get. Yamaha was the first manufacturer to design and put these into production motorcycles. Unfortunately, the EXUP system, like many similar systems in use today, tended to seize, and the bike currently in this video unfortunately has a non-working exhaust power valve. I believe it seized in the sort of low down position, so it's lost a little bit of the top end. However, it doesn't feel like it's lost too much. In 2025, obviously nearly all bikes have electronics of some description, so it was interesting to ride the Yamaha FZR1000 EXup that doesn't have ABS, that doesn't have traction control, doesn't have lean angle this or lean angle that. In fact, it basically has a rev counter, a speedometer, and a temperature gauge, and oil indicator, neutral warning lights. And it has a switch, electronic switch, for the fuel reserve. So when you start basically losing power, you switch that little switch and it goes on to the reserve tank. No electronics. What a machine. What a machine. It still goes very well today. The biggest difference I would say I noticed, and even going from this FZR1000 to the Thunderace to the R1, there wasn't a huge amount of difference I felt. The Thunderace was a little bit heavier, or it felt heavier, but I think at that point it was more going down the route of sports tourer rather than out and out sports bike. However, the difference between the EXUP or the Thunderace to the R1 was the engine internals on the R1 were so much lighter and the engine spun up so much quicker. It almost made the EXUP engine feel like it was a diesel. It picked up engine speed. I mean, it's still a very rapid motorcycle, there's no doubt about it, but it didn't spin up anywhere near how modern inline fours, or especially the sports ones, spin up. They spin up so easily. In the 80s and 90s, the inline fours picked up speed. I mean, as I've sort of mentioned already, 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3.9 seconds. It's still a very quick bike. The other unusual thing is the FZR, and I think from memory the Thunderace, had a 5-speed gearbox. Almost unheard of now. Nearly everything has a 6-speed gearbox. But the FZR1000 Genesis and EXUP and Thunderace all featured a 5-speed gearbox. Oh, and you don't get a gear indicator on them either. No quick shifter, no auto blipper, hydraulic clutch. It's a different world. Or it was a different world back in 1994-95. Riding the FZR1000 EXup, the geometry compared to modern bikes is it feels long, and it probably certainly is long. It tends to roll into bends rather than drop on its side, but it still feels fairly planted when you do that. The braking system, which was, you know, top of the range back in its day, certainly compared to modern bikes, produces limited power and a quite wooden feel. It's a standard steel brakes master cylinder on it, you know, typical Yamaha, probably used on the loads of bikes at the time. It wasn't a special master cylinder, so you know, that maybe explains. You certainly get used to it, but you know, when you hammer on the anchors, well, I'm certainly aware that there's no ABS, so the lack of feel does kick the confidence a little bit. Now, as I mentioned earlier, 4-cylinder had 5 valves per cylinder. Now, Yamaha played about with multiple valve cylinder heads. They actually found that a 7-valve head per cylinder was the best option. However, the increased production costs over 5 valves per head didn't merit the performance gains it gave. The performance gains were just slightly better than the 5-valve. But yeah, you know, 5 valves a cylinder, I don't think you get that at all now. Compared to modern superbikes, you know, 200 plus brake horsepower, it only makes 145 brake horsepower. It's carburetor rather than fuel injection, but the 4 38mm Makini carbs deliver glitch-free fueling that many modern fuel-injected bikes could only hope for. The EXUP system makes the big 1003cc motor flexible and friendly with a good stack of mid-range. And on a road it has more than enough power to amuse. But unfortunately the gearbox can feel a little bit clunky. I don't know if this is because it's a hydraulic clutch or whether it's just the design of the gearbox. It's not BMW clunky, it's just clunky. It's not as smooth as, say, a Suzuki gearbox. Braking at the front end came via twin 6-piston brake calipers. Not sure if they were made in-house by Yamaha, but certainly at the time they were, you know, pretty top spec. They haven't aged very well, unfortunately. So it was twin 310mm discs. Now, strangely, they came, or strangely for modern times, they came with a 130/60 VR17 front wheel. Now, I don't think there's many bits of rubber that size now. The rear was a 170/60 VR17. That you still can get, but certainly I've now put on the more normal size of 120/70 ZR17s on the front and a 180/55 ZR17 in the rear, and it handles really well with that. Fuel tank capacity, decent for a sort of bike that sporty. It's 19 litres, including a reserve of about 3.4, just under a gallon. It's a long beast. It's 2.2 metres long. Now, this is where someone of my stature, I'm 5'8", roughly 29-inch inseam, the seat height is 775. The seat height is 775 millimetres, whereas my S1000RR is something like 835 or 840 mil. When did we become... I know there's a lot of tall people out there, I know that, but when did the Japanese and even the Europeans stop making bikes with decent seat heights? Because even tall people, a smaller seat height means you get your feet flat on the floor, you're much more stable. You know, 775, that's 7 centimetres of a difference in 30 years. I don't know what's happened. Front suspension, unbranded, just Yamaha stuff. Front was a 43mm inverted fork, preload adjustable with 120mm of travel. The rear is a monoshock. Again, no name, no blame, adjustable preload and rebound dampen, and about 130mm of travel. Allegedly, the very last of the models, the one in question today, could do the 0 to 100 kilometres, which is roughly 60, in 2.9 seconds. Not a bad beast, and it's aged quite a bit in a lot of ways, but the one thing it's not aged in is that fun factor is still there. You ride these bikes and it puts a smile on your face. For sub £2,000, I don't think you can have more fun with all your bike gear on. As I say, I owned one when I was quite a bit younger in 1995. I unfortunately got rid of it stupidly to pay for my wedding reception, and I regretted getting rid of it almost as soon as I did. But you know, life throws things at you, you go mad occasionally, and 2023 tail end I was lucky enough to see an identical model, not in pristine condition, certainly not pristine, but it's in decent condition. And I thought, yeah, I really want to do some miles on this. I want to see what I sort of missed out on 30 years ago. And I'm hopefully discovering that. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. My FZR1000 EXup is definitely like a time machine. I'd love to say it makes me feel like a teenager, but yeah, it was sort of after my teenage years. But certainly reminds me of the fun I had in my 20s. Thanks for watching. If you liked, please like and subscribe. Thank you.